We are live. We are live. Yes, we have literally just gone off the air for Impact Wrestling against all odds and chaos. Absolute chaos in that ending to Moose versus Kenny Omega there. So what we will do in this stream is what we always do in these post-show streams. I don't like to call them reviews. I know I've said before that they're not reviews, and sometimes people go, oh, but they are reviews. They are reviews. But they're not. I don't give star ratings. I don't give all that kind of stuff. What we do, we go through the matches, say what we like, say what we didn't like, what we think is going to happen in the future, all that kind of stuff, because certainly coming out of Against All Odds tonight, there is certainly a lot that could and will happen going forward from this as we head closer and closer to Slammiversary. How is the outcome? How is the main event of Slammiversary going to be affected? Because, of course, one half of the main event of Slammiversary has just been fired by the executive vice president of Impact Wrestling, but we know in reality he's not the executive vice president, Don Callis. So we're going to get into all of that. We're going to get into that crazy, absolutely crazy main event and just the ramifications of it all. We will be getting into it, so don't worry, we'll be getting into it. If you are new to the channel, though, be sure to subscribe. Bottom right-hand corner, smash a like on the like button if you enjoyed Against All Odds. Smash a like on the like button if you're just confused as to what happens next. Where do we go from here? It's just crazy, absolutely crazy as to where we go from here. But I mean, where do you start? Honestly, where do you start with that? It's just, it feels, you know, it does feel crazy, isn't it? And you know, it's where do we go with it? Oh God, it does seem. Oh, I don't know. Steven says mic is off, mate. I mean, I don't think so. I think as far as I see, we're fine. I think so. Yeah, the volume might be a bit low. That might be the issue. So, but yes, I mean, gosh, you know, absolute, just crazy, right? So let's get into the matches first. Let's get into the matches, and we can get into that main event because I think that's really what everyone's going to want to talk about is that main event as to Against All Odds and how this affects things going forward. Because just where do you go? It's crazy. Let's start off. Open the show with the street fight, the tag team street fight. It was Sami Callihan and Tommy Dreamer. They defeated the Good Brothers. Really surprised with this outcome. Now, I wasn't. Again, we just come off the watch along, and basically the moment on the watch along that I saw this match was first, my spidey senses started to tingle, as they would say. The reason my spidey senses started to tingle because I started to think, okay, we're seeing something a bit fishy going to happen when it comes to the main event. The reason why we're going to see something a bit fishy happen in the main event, because the whole point of doing this match, the Sami Callihan versus the Good Brothers, and Scott D'Amore mentioned it on commentary for the main event. They mentioned it on Impact Wrestling the last couple of weeks, didn't they? They spoke about, well, if they're in Nashville, right, if they're in Nashville, there's no way they're going to be in Florida. They can't get to Jacksonville because they're going to be competing in Nashville that night. Wow. Again, we now know that that's not exactly accurate, and it was meant to throw us off, but it didn't necessarily work because this, the first thing I said on the watch along is, okay, if they're in the first match of the show, in reality, again, I know this was all pre-taped, but in sort of logic here, could theoretically someone get on a plane and be in Jacksonville by the end of the show? Of course, the answer is yes. That was Sami Callihan. I was concerned it was going to be the Good Brothers, but we now know that, yes, someone can be in Nashville at the start of the show and they can be in Jacksonville by the end of it. So, again, I get the whole point of, well, Sami Callihan and the Good Brothers, they're going to be involved in this match, so they can't get involved. Yet why, logically, would you put that match at the beginning of the show if you're Scott D'Amore? That, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't really know about that one, but look. The match was fine. Street fight, enjoyable, right? Enjoyable street fight. These things are. The gimmicks were out in full flow. The trash, the garbage cans, the cookie sheets, brooms, all that kind of stuff. The match was fine. The outcome surprises me. I'm going to be honest. The outcome surprises me. And when I did my predictions talking about this, one of my predictions was that the Good Brothers would win this one. Now, the reason I said the Good Brothers would win is because they needed a win. I understand that Sami Callihan is obviously in the main event of Slammiversary, and irrespective of his firing tonight, he will be in the main event of Slammiversary. That's set in stone now, I guess, at this point. And I understand that Sami Callihan would need the victory to build up momentum to his championship main event at Slammiversary. I understand that. But the Good Brothers at this point, I mean, I remember Scott Hall and Kevin Nash used to talk about it when they were in WCW. They said, we're the highest paid job guys. Because that's what the Good Brothers have come at this point. How many jobs are the Good Brothers doing in Impact Wrestling? Since Sacrifice, that was in March. Sacrifice, they lost to Finn Juice. Rebellion, they lost once again to Finn Juice. Impact Under Siege, they lost in a 6-man tag to Finn Juice. They lose tonight as well. Kyle Anderson's just eating pinfalls at the moment. And I'm not saying just because you're on a lot of money, that means you should be winning matches, but these are still big stars. These are the Good Brothers. They were members of the Bullet Club. Kyle Anderson was leader of the Bullet Club at one point. These are big names in the history of New Japan, and they're stars coming from WWE and all this kind of stuff. And yet again, they're losing matches. I just find that really surprising. Again, these are guys that were arguably they were the crown jewel of your signings that you brought over as part of the WWE free agents last year. And at the moment, they're just continuously losing matches, doing jobs, losing matches, doing jobs. I look at the Good Brothers now and I say, where do you go? Where do they go from this? They're not going to challenge for the tag team championships at the moment. They're miles off that, absolutely miles off it. I guess they're just part of the elite. It doesn't matter. They're just part of the elite at this point, but they're just eating defeats over and over again. It's very surprising to me, very surprising. And like I said, I'm not criticizing Sami Callihan getting a victory because he is in the main event of Slammiversary. He is going to be facing, even though he was fired tonight, he is going to be facing Kenny Omega. That is going to happen. I just find that, the Good Brothers, again, I don't know the details of their contracts, but one would suspect they're probably on 2 of the highest contracts on the Impact Wrestling roster right now, and they've been doing jobs since March. And don't worry, they're not leaving Impact anytime soon because they were signed by Impact Wrestling July last year. They made their debut at Slammiversary. The announcement was made at midnight, the day of Slammiversary. They signed with Impact. They signed 2-year deals. So they've still got a year left on that contract, and they're still doing jobs. It's surprising. Very, very surprising. So, again, I understand Sami Callihan getting the victory for the purpose of keeping him momentum and keeping that momentum going for the main event of Slammiversary. I totally get that. But the Good Brothers doing the jobs over and over again. Again, surprising. But it is what it is, I suppose. And now we know what happened in the main event. I guess that makes sense. But, yeah, very, very surprising for that one for me. Next, we had Kojima versus Joe Doering. Now, I think this match went exactly how people expected it to. Physical, beat the hell out of each other. Started off very slow. Very, very slow. And I was slightly concerned for a brief second there. I thought, oh no, is this going to be 2 larger guys just kind of heavy hitting, doing forearms and that? Is that it? Is that what we're getting? But in fairness to the guys, as the last sort of 5 minutes or so, they beat the hell out of each other. Joe Doering took some offense. Kojima took some offense. There was an elbow drop that Kojima did to Joe Doering. That was the stiffest elbow drop you've ever seen. Like sometimes they do the elbow drop and it's not really an elbow drop. It's kind of like a side drop and they move their arms out the way and they just kind of land on them and all that kind of stuff. That wasn't it. Kojima jumped and did a legit elbow drop on Joe Doering. You could see he went... So Joe Doering then hit a running crossbody off the ropes and just absolutely floored him. That was great as well. There was a big lariat. Joe Doering does the whole Death Valley driver into a lariat. That was a lot of fun. He kicked out of that surprisingly. Joe Doering gets the victory after sort of the twisting powerbomb. I enjoyed it. I think it's the right outcome. Again, I predicted in my prediction show, I said that I thought Joe Doering would win. The reason I said I thought Joe Doering would win in the prediction show is because I'm following the kind of model that they're going with these people that are coming in from New Japan that are only doing a TV taping. It was the same with El Phantasmo. El Phantasmo came in, worked a TV taping for Impact Wrestling, eventually built up to an X Division Championship match of Josh Alexander at Impact Under Siege. But what was the outcome there? Josh Alexander won, and El Phantasmo goes back to New Japan. And I think that's the outcome here with Kojima. That's why I thought Kojima's going to win here. Kojima's not going to lose here, rather. Joe Doering's going to win because, again, this is what happens as part of this New Japan relationship. They come in, work a TV taping, builds up to an Impact Plus match or a pay-per-view match, but then eventually they lose because they've got to go back to New Japan. And it doesn't make a lot of sense for an Impact talent who's staying on television to be putting the New Japan guy over and then the New Japan guy goes back to New Japan. That doesn't make any sense, does it? So I always felt that Joe Doering would win, but, for a match, as I mentioned, that started slowly and I wasn't sure on during the early stages, that it actually turned into quite a fun match. So I'll give them credit for that. I enjoyed that quite a lot. That was a lot of fun. Now, the next match was the X Division #1 Contenders match. And this ended up as a no contest. It was Petey Williams versus Trey Miguel versus Ace Austin versus Chris Bay versus Rohit Raju. Now, the match ended in a no contest after Madman Fulton, of course, is the associate of Ace Austin. Madman Fulton came out, got involved, and just took everyone out. And then the referee, obviously, you could say there was no disqualification because there were so many people in this match, but the referee said, you know what, I'm not having it, because Madman Fulton destroyed everyone and then basically laid Ace Austin across. I think it was Rohit and maybe Pete Williams, or I don't know who it was, but he laid him across and the referee went, no, I'm waving it off. Now, you could say, oh, no contest, what are we watching Monday Night Raw here? I feel you. I feel your pain, and I understand what people would be saying when they say, oh, no contest. Oh, it's a very WWE finish. And also, I understand that people would probably say, you would criticize this if this happens on Monday Night Raw, so why aren't you criticizing it when it's happening on Impact Wrestling? It's a good point, but I will give you a good answer why I think this is the right move, right? And I'm not being an Impact stan. I'm not trying to overly justify it. I'm not a fan of no contest finishes. I'm not a fan of double countouts. I'm not a fan of double disqualifications or anything like that. That's not usually my deal. But what I will say when it comes to this one, it's the right decision because you've got 5 number 1 contenders now. If you've got 5 number 1 contenders and you add the champion, you have 6 people. You have 6 people in a championship match going into Slammiversary. What does that lead to? That leads to a King of the Mountain match. Yes, I think we're going into Slammiversary. Josh Alexander mentioned it in his promo this week on Impact Wrestling. He mentioned that he was the X Division champion and the King of the Mountain. I think we're going into Slammiversary and we're going to see a King of the Mountain match for the X Division Championship. I think it's going to be Josh Alexander versus Petey Williams versus Trey Miguel versus Ace Austin versus Chris Bay versus Rohit Raju in a King of the Mountain match for the X Division Championship. Now, that for me, if that's the direction that they are going in, I don't mind the outcome tonight. If it's not, then I have a problem with the outcome because I don't like no contests. I like wins and losses to matter. I like outcomes to matter. But if this number 1 contender match ending in a no contest, having 5 guys plus your champion, having 6 guys go into Slammiversary, chasing and competing for the X Division Championship, the King of the Mountain match is a staple of Slammiversary. Obviously, as I mentioned, Josh Alexander referenced himself as the King of the Mountain this past week on Impact Wrestling. To me, we're going into Slammiversary in a King of the Mountain match for the X Division Championship, and that is incredibly exciting because I love me a King of the Mountain match. Are the rules a bit convoluted? Yes and no, but it's old school TNA wrestling, and I don't have a problem with that. And as we mentioned before, there is a real renewed focus and emphasis on the X Division Championship right now. It's been a push from Impact Wrestling officials that they want the X Division Championship to be equivalent to the Impact World Championship. It's akin to the ECW Television Championship in the late 90s when Rob Van Dam was the champion for over 700 days. That's what they want to get with the X Division Championship. They do that by having big matches like the Iron Man match. They do that by having matches like a King of the Mountain match at Slammiversary, and I think that's the direction that we're heading in. So I don't necessarily have a problem with the outcome as long as that's the direction that we're going in. If we're not, then I have a problem. Then I will agree with you. But apart from that, I think that's fine. The match itself, I mean, what more needs to be said? I mean, Petey Williams, Trey Miguel, Ace Austin, Chris Bay, Rohit Raju. Do I need to tell you it was a good match? Because it was. It always was going to be because those guys are just unbelievably talented. Next match was Rich Swann versus W. Morrissey. Now, W. Morrissey gets the win, which was predicted and expected. I saw some people unhappy that he maybe didn't beat Rich Swann with a finish and all that kind of stuff. Look, W. Morrissey, and I am going through these quite quickly because I think everyone just wants to talk about the main event here. Look, W. Morrissey is being built up. He's getting the monster push. This is a guy that when he was in WWE, they saw his potential. They saw his talent. They saw him as a guy that could be in top feuds with the likes of Daniel Bryan. Impact Wrestling realizes if they've got a clear and sound-minded W. Morrissey, then they've got a big deal in their company. I think what they're building up to, and I mentioned this previously on the watch-along stream, I think Impact Wrestling, I think their thought process is, say, I don't know, Sami Callihan or Moose wins the Impact World Championship at, say, Slammiversary. If they can build up W. Morrissey as this big monster heel, eventually whoever the babyface is to defeat W. Morrissey feels like a big deal. They feel like a star. Impact Wrestling realize they've got someone major on their hands in W. Morrissey. So they're giving him the big push. I thought the match was good. I thought it was as competitive as it needed to be. I think Rich Swann got just the right amount of offense. He shouldn't be getting in a ton of offense against Morrissey anyway. And they had a situation whereby the referee saying to Rich Swann, you've got to defend yourself. If you're not defending yourself, if you're not putting your hands up, I've got to ring the bell. And Rich Swann instead gave Morrissey the middle finger. So Rich Swann came out of it even in defeat as this sort of, the big baby face, the never say die baby face, the Rey Mysterio-esque baby face against the giant person. And frankly, the giant most of the time should win. I know it's sports entertainment, but there should be some element of logic here. And Morrissey, for me, winning is the right call. Again, I know some people might not be happy that he beat Rich Swann in terms of he didn't use a finish and all that kind of stuff. I think it's the right call. I think it was the predictable one, and I think it's the right one. So didn't have a problem with it. The match itself, again, I thought it was competitive as it was. I thought pretty much every match on this show was enjoyable to a point. I think it was maybe people were just focusing on the main event, which is probably fair enough. But yeah, again, I didn't have a problem with this one at all. I think it was the right outcome. Next, we had Jordynne Grace versus Tenille Dashwood, and Tenille Dashwood defeated Jordynne Grace. As we mentioned in the prediction show, as we mentioned in the watch-along, the Jordynne Grace heel turn looks to be getting closer and closer and closer. Jordynne Grace had Tenille Dashwood seemingly won, and Rachel Ellering accidentally... Well, she looks like to have the match won. She's got this sleeper hold locked onto Tenille Dashwood, and the referee does the whole one. If the hand drops 3 times, drops 2 times, it looks like it's going to drop for the 3rd time. Caleb with a K gets up on the apron. Rachel Ellering goes over to pull Caleb down. She's brawling with him. The referee gets distracted. Jordynne Grace gets up, starts blaming Rachel Ellering, saying, "You distracted him. I had the match won." This allows Tenille Dashwood to roll up. Yes, a roll up. It's like Monday Night Raw. Manages to roll up Jordynne Grace to get the victory. Post-match, Jordynne Grace is furious with Rachel Ellering. She's not happy. She says, "I didn't need your help. I told you I didn't want to need your help, and you got involved again," all that kind of stuff. She then hits a Michinoku driver on Caleb with a K, and then just does the angriest face ever. Really, So this Jordynne Grace heel turn is getting obviously closer and closer. Obviously, at some point, she is going to turn. She is not happy that Rachel Ellering seemingly gets involved, and she said I didn't need your help, but she did it anyway. The only thing I could see with this one is maybe they just go in the complete opposite direction. And maybe they're teasing this frustration with Jordynne Grace. She's frustrated. And then maybe in the end, it's Rachel Ellering that turns on Jordynne Grace and says, "I can't deal with someone who's such a hothead. I can't deal with someone that's so frustrated. I can't deal with someone that's always, letting their emotions get in the way of all this kind of stuff." Either way, Jordynne Grace is going to feud with Rachel Ellering. That's going to happen. And it's just a case of who's the heel and who's the babyface. Logic would suggest at the moment it's going to be Jordynne Grace turning heel. And again, I've mentioned this before. I don't know if I truly buy into Jordynne Grace. She's the weak link. She's a former Knockouts champion, right? So, I mean, some weak link. She was Knockouts champion last year. Either way, Tenille Dashwood gets a victory, and the Jordynne Grace, Rachel Ellering story continues, but it looks like Jordynne Grace is going to turn heel very soon. Knockouts Tag Team Championships, Fire and Flavor retain over Kimberly and Susan. Again, expected. I don't really have a lot to say about this one because it was expected. I feel like with the Knockouts Tag Team Championship, it's just kind of placeholder in the sense that they're building up. I always say this about championship reigns. Championship victories are great, but what makes reigns great, not Roman Reigns, but what makes championship reigns is great is victories. Constant victories against different teams, victory after win after win after win. That's what's made Deonna Purrazzo's championship reign so great. It's victories. It's constant victories over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. That's what makes championship victories so great. So this was just a run-of-the-mill victory for Fire and Flavor. But I think eventually the big money is if the Iconics come in. And I think the Iconics do come into Impact Wrestling. I truly do. I think the Iconics come in, and I think the Iconics and Fire and Flavor, I think, go perfectly together as the top feuding tag teams in the Knockouts tag team division. But look, it's just refreshing, and I don't want to turn this into bash WWE or anything like that, because we don't do that here on the channel. We like what we like, and we praise what we like. We critique what we don't like, and we just share opinions in the live chat, all that kind of stuff. What I will say is that it is refreshing to see a women's tag team division with actual legitimate female tag teams and female tag teams as champions with names, with matching entrances and tag team psychology and ring attire and all that kind of stuff and all that kind of stuff. So Fire and Flavor get the victory. Tasha Steelz hits the frog splash for the win. Again, expected. It's a good victory for them. I expect the Iconics to come into Impact Wrestling at Slammiversary. I know some people expect them to go to AEW. I just don't see what they benefit. I just don't. I mean, I guess finances, but I just don't see what they benefit by going into AEW when they're a tag team and they have a female tag team division waiting for them in Impact Wrestling, and they have female tag teams waiting for them in Impact Wrestling too. If they go into AEW, where's your female tag teams there? Britt Baker and Rebel, I guess. On top of that, what, you're going to have Vicky Guerrero and Nyla Rose matches? No, you're going to go into Impact Wrestling. You've got Fire and Flavor, Kimberly and Susan, Jordan Grace and Rachel Ellering. If they stick around, maybe Tenille Dashwood and Taylor Wilde will team up again. There's teams there. There are teams that they could face off against. Rosemary and Havoc's another one. I think they might branch off of coming out of Deonna Purrazzo's victory tonight as well. So if you're the Iconics, you would look at where am I going to have the best impact, pun intended. It is in Impact Wrestling because it's just everything's set up for them there. So Fire and Flavor retain here as expected. The match was fine, but again, I think it's building to whatever happens at Slammiversary. Speaking of matches, that was fine. Impact Tag Team Championship, Violent by Design, Deonna and Rhino. Of course, they're using the Freebird rule. They had Eric Young at ringside, defeated Decay, which is Black Taurus and Crazy Steve. To be honest, this match was better than I thought it was going to be. I'm a big fan of Black Taurus. I really am. I wish, I'm not a fan of the whole Mantar gimmick that he kind of has, but I do enjoy his matches. I think he's incredibly athletic for a guy of his size to do the things that he does. He's bouncing off the ropes. Legitimately, I don't know if this is accurate, but he did look like he hurt his knee when he did the bump to the outside. He fell awkwardly. He fell awkwardly a couple of times. So I don't know if legitimately he was injured. Normal Guy says Peyton Royce is Sean Spears' husband. Peyton Royce is Sean Spears' husband. I think Sean Spears is Peyton Royce's husband. Yes, I know. But that doesn't play into everything. It does play parts into it. Ryan DeMont says, what was your favorite match? Probably the main event, to be honest. Ryan DeMont says, hey, do they do the countdown? Do they do the countdown to the big pay-per-view on YouTube, or do you still have to watch the pre-show on FITE? Probably FITE. Sergio says, good to hear from you, and great job. Appreciate that, Sergio. Ryan DeMont says, DM, totally agree. Yeah, some of the thing. Kren Lucha Libre waves, how you doing, my friend? Welcome, everyone who is joining us. Smash a like on the like button. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe as well. Bottom right-hand corner. Impact Tag Team Championships. Yes, I nearly got distracted there for a second. Impact Tag Team Championships. Deonna and Rhino retain. Again, expected. Match was fine. It's interesting when it comes to the tag team division right now because you do wonder. It does feel a little bit light maybe on the tag team division. A little bit light, I will say. So you wonder who's going to be the ones to take the titles off of Violent by Design. I mean, they just won them. So, bear with. But you do wonder, it's not going to be the Good Brothers because they continue to lose all the time. I've seen some people talk about maybe Rich Swann and Willie Mack. That's a possibility as well. So this match was fine. Again, enjoyable. But it was just there. It was just there. It's not the amazing tag team matches that Impact was doing, say, this time last year. And they could do with the Motor City Machine Guns coming back. They could do. Maybe with the Young Bucks getting involved. Kenny Omega has both the Impact and the AEW Gold. Maybe the Young Bucks try and get that as well. So that might be a situation as well to look at in the future. But Violent by Design get the victory in what was to be expected, I think, there. We had the Knockouts Championship. Deonna Purrazzo versus Rosemary. And again, expected. Deonna Purrazzo retains the title here, but a very psychological match here by Deonna Purrazzo, as they always are. She targeted the shoulder, the arm for the majority of the match, setting up the Fujiwara armbar finish, but then eventually in the closing moments of the match, she then takes the knee brace off the surgically repaired knee of Rosemary, hits a pile driver on Rosemary, and defeats her by pinfall. So several times you would think, oh, she's going to go to the finish because that's how Deonna Purrazzo does her matches, right? She attacks the arm, utilizes the arm. It's psychology, constantly smashes the arm into the ring post, does all these different maneuvers, these submissions on the arm, and then gets the Fujiwara armbar, the Virtuosa, and then you think, right, that's how she gets the tap-out victory. She did a different way this time. Won by pinfall, spike pile driver, different. different strings to the bow, and if you win using different moves, that creates false finishes in the future. Why were the Undertaker and Shawn Michaels matches so great at WrestleMania 25 and 26? Because the Undertaker has about a millionth different finishes utilized, whether it's the chokeslam, the last ride, the tombstone, Hell's Gate, all those different kinds of stuff they can utilize, and when they utilize those, it creates a false finish in the future. So Deonna Purrazzo might hit a spike pile driver on whoever, Chelsea Green at Slammiversary, she kicks out, it's a false finish, right? That's the thing. Gemini Gamer with the $4.99 super chat, appreciate that, says, I will be at Slammiversary, can't wait, it's going to be fire. I am incredibly jealous, Gemini Gamer. That is awesome. Appreciate the super chat. If you want to join Gemini Gamer by doing a super chat, you can do that by clicking the $sign, but jealous, very jealous at Slammiversary. Only select few people can be there, and they sold out immediately, so I really appreciate the message and really appreciate the super chat. Thanks very much. It's a great way to support the channel. Makes doing things like this, just interact with you guys, make things like doing this so worthwhile, so I really appreciate it. But yes, Knockouts Championship, Deonna Purrazzo retained, Spike Pile Driver, decent match, but it's the main event. Let's talk about the main event, because that's, I guess, what everyone really wants me to talk about, because there was so much of this main event. Right, the main event was Kenny Omega versus Moose for the Impact World Championship. Took place not in Nashville in Skyways Studio, took place inside Daly's Place, the home of AEW. Didn't have the normal Impact commentary team either. It had a commentary team of Tony Schiavone. Yes, Tony Schiavone did commentary for an Impact World Championship match, which was awesome. Scott D'Amore, who, by the way, shout out to Scott D'Amore. How great was Scott D'Amore on commentary? I thought he was great. And Don Callis on commentary. Now, a couple of things I'll get into before we get into sort of the ramifications of what happened at the end of it, because there was a lot that happened. One thing I will say is it felt really surreal and great to see Moose come out in Daly's Place. I enjoyed seeing Moose in the Impact in the, it felt like the old Impact Zone entranceway, but the AEW entrance circle in Daly's Place. That was cool. Seeing him come to the ring inside of an AEW ring was very cool. Justin Roberts doing the ring announcement was very cool. They also had some pro wrestlers surrounding the ringside area like they had previously in Daly's Place. I do think the production could have been better, or the setup could have been better from an AEW point of view. Things that I would have myself improved about the production is they've got the Daly's Place current configuration like it is for Friday Night Dynamite. So obviously previously they had during the pandemic, they had the hard cam face the entrance ramp. They don't have that anymore. They have the hard cam facing what would be fans, and then above it is like a Titantron. The issue is that was just dark space. That was complete dark space. So in reality, it was just black. You didn't see anything. So you had the ring, and then behind it was just black. There was no graphics. The graphics were way above it, but you couldn't see that on the hard cam. And obviously there was no fans there either, so it was black. They didn't have any AEW logos on the turnbuckle as well. So when they were just using the hard cam image, it was just a ring that was black. There was a black background, Brian Hedmer, Moose, and Kenny Omega in there. It looked to me a bit like the Firefly Funhouse match from WrestleMania in 2020, because it was just nothing. And I just felt like if you'd have had the wrestlers in the ringside area, you could have had the wrestlers on the hard cam as well. It's little things like that just would have made it not feel as cold, I think. Another thing I would have probably say as well is that it had the wrestlers surrounding the ring, but at points they did go quiet and sort of forget to start to keep cheering. So the atmosphere at points was a bit quiet. I felt they could have sweetened it, because we went from a point where watching the show inside the Impact Zone, they had the enhanced audio, which constantly goes, and you do adjust to after a while, from then going to the real sound of Daly's Place. At points it was quiet, and at points you did sort of go, oh wait, I don't really know what's going on there. That feels a little bit odd. So yeah, some points of the production, I would have said, like, we could have maybe had the wrestlers on the hard cam. Why did the hard cam, was it so dark? Why did they remove the AEW branding from the turnbuckles? I get it's an Impact Wrestling sanctioned match and all that kind of stuff, but it just, at points, it felt very cold. Now, the match itself was excellent, despite some of the issues that they may have had. I think in terms of the atmosphere was good because it was a real atmosphere, but at points it was quiet, and at points it did remind you, didn't it, of those shows early on in the pandemic where, yes, you had people surrounding the ring, but at points it did feel quiet. At points it did feel a little bit off. But despite that, look, Kenny Omega and Moose overcame it. Excellent match. Obviously, you expect excellent matches from Kenny Omega because he is one of, if not the best wrestler in the world today. He just is. I think Moose has to take tremendous, tremendous credit. This is the guy that, frankly, 2 or 3 years ago, he wasn't having these kind of matches because he wasn't as good as he is now. I think he stepped up. There are certainly still points we go, Moose maybe needs to improve on that, but I think he did an excellent, excellent job. I think it was far more psychological than I thought it was going to be. I thought we were going to see a different kind of match, but I think it was far more psychological. I enjoyed that. I did enjoy that. But the outcome, again, you can tell this is an Impact show because they don't really do these kind of finishes that much at AEW, which is good. Different promotions should do different stuff. So the closing moments, Moose is going for a spear. Kenny Omega pulls the referee, Brian Hedmer in the way. He takes a Brian Hedmer bump, referee's down. This allows the Young Bucks to come out. Yes, the Young Bucks, Generation Me, return to Impact Wrestling. Max and Jeremy Buck are back in Impact Wrestling. I predicted that. I think maybe it was probably relatively predictable. Once we knew it was going to be in Jacksonville, once we knew that the Good Brothers were going to be stuck in Nashville, but it was going to be in Jacksonville, given the Elite as a faction now in Impact, in AEW rather, of the Good Brothers, the Young Bucks, and Kenny Omega, it felt inevitable that we were going to see a situation where the Young Bucks come out. So the Young Bucks come out, they attack Moose, they hit a couple of super kicks, they hit the BTE trigger. This then they then help Kenny Omega get Moose on his shoulders for the one-winged angel, and then he gets the 3 count. So Kenny Omega gets the victory. He pins Moose by the efforts of the Young Bucks. Now, what does that mean? I would be really, really, really surprised. I would be really surprised. I would be surprised if we don't get the Bucks at Slammiversary. We have to, right? Surely we have to. I mean, they interfered, and I know it was in Jacksonville, but Slammiversary, they do have history. They spoke about when we first had the announcement of the working relationship between Impact and AEW. They spoke of their desire to compete for Impact again, maybe not as Generation Me, but as for the Young Bucks. So I think we do. I think we do. Who do they face off against? I don't know. Maybe the Elite implodes, and maybe it's the Young Bucks versus the Good Brothers. Maybe the Good Brothers are tired of losing. Maybe it's the Young Bucks versus Moose and a tag team partner. Maybe it's the Young Bucks versus, I don't know who it's going to be against, but certainly there's a possibility that the Young Bucks compete. The Generation Me compete at Slammiversary. Maybe it's the Young Bucks versus the Motor City Machine Guns again. How about that one from Match of Slammiversary? Now that would be a lot of fun. But I do think it means we're going to get the Young Bucks at Slammiversary in a match. So Kenny Omega gets the victory. He retains the title. And then suddenly the lights go out and we see the hacker sign, and Sami Callihan, despite being in the opening match of the show, does appear inside Daly's place. Now, that's pretty surreal, in fairness. The whole thing was about Sami Callihan is banned. Sami Callihan shouldn't be allowed inside Daly's place. Sami Callihan, he's a reprobate. He's crazy. He smashes people in the face with baseball bats. He's on bans list. He shouldn't be allowed in. Yet, he was there. He was in Jacksonville. He was inside of Daly's place. He was on AEW turf. And it did feel pretty cool. The next thing you would hope for is that John Moxley was going to come out and they would go full Switchblade conspiracy. That would be crazy. Maybe that's what we're going to get at some point. I don't know. It does open up a lot of avenues, doesn't it? So Sami Callihan's there, attacks the Young Bucks with a baseball bat, sets it up like he's going to smash Kenny Omega's face with a baseball bat and the steel chair, the same thing that he did to Eddie Edwards. You're thinking that he's going to do that, and suddenly Don Callis gets up off commentary. He's furious. He says, Sami Callihan, you don't do this. I'm an executive vice president of Impact. I'm your boss. And then he fires Sami Callihan, says, Sami Callihan, you're fired. And then Don Callis leaves. Scott D'Amore leaves the broadcast booth as well. He goes chasing after Don Callis. Sami Callihan swearing at him. He's going, it's bullshit. This is bullshit. He's furious. And that's how we go off the air. So there's a lot to break down there, because that main event, I mean, it just felt like so much happened in the space of like 5 minutes. You've got a match going on between Moose and Kenny Omega inside Daly's place. That's a big deal anyway. The Young Bucks then get involved in an Impact World Championship match. The Young Bucks appear under the Impact umbrella again. That's big. Sami Callihan then, an Impact Wrestling wrestler, appears inside Daly's place. That's big. Don Callis gets off commentary, then fires Sami Callihan. There was a lot going on. There was a lot going on there. A lot going on. Obviously, Don Callis is not, I mean, I hate to break it to you, Don Callis is not an executive of Impact Wrestling anymore. He is not. He is no longer an executive of Impact Wrestling. He was removed from the Anthem Sports and Entertainment website. It's been confirmed by numerous outlets. Don Callis is not in real life an executive vice president of Impact Wrestling or Anthem Sports and Entertainment anymore. He is an AEW talent. Don Callis has an AEW talent contract. He only manages Kenny Omega. He only appears in Kenny Omega segments. The only reason he's on Impact Wrestling television at this point is because Kenny Omega is the Impact World Champion. The moment Kenny Omega drops the Impact World Championship, Don Callis disappears with Kenny Omega. That's how it works. So in reality, this storyline of Don Callis still being the executive vice president is something that I've spoken about a couple of times here on the channel, is that we haven't had any official confirmation by Impact Wrestling that Don Callis is no longer an executive vice president with the company. Why? Because we have a storyline on the horizon, ladies and gentlemen. It's looking like at some point, and maybe it spins out of this, because Don Callis is abusing his power as an executive, because he continues to abuse his power and his judgments now has been ruined. He can no longer be impartial. Scott D'Amore several times said, you've got to pick a side. You've got to pick a side. You've got to either pick being Kenny Omega's manager, or you've got to be the executive vice president. You can't do both. Your loyalties are to Kenny Omega, but your brain and your impartiality should be to Impact. You can't do both. And I think they're going to use this as this is the time he stepped over the edge. This is the time that he's gone too far. He became impartial. He fired someone. He ruined the Slammiversary main event, because it's meant to be Sami Callihan versus Kenny Omega now. He ruined the Slammiversary main event by firing Sami Callihan. He didn't have grounds to do it. And I think eventually we're going to get to a point where obviously Sami Callihan's not fired. Obviously, eventually we're going to get Sami Callihan versus Kenny Omega. I think we're going to get to a point whereby Scott D'Amore, Anthem Board of Directors, whoever, reverse the decision. They bring back Sami Callihan, and they've spoken to the board of directors. They fire Don Callis. Don Callis has been removed as an executive by Impact Wrestling, by Anthem Sports and Entertainment, therefore making official what we actually know to be legitimate in real life, that Don Callis is no longer an executive vice president with Anthem Sports and Entertainment. So there's a lot of reality they're weaving in here. That's what they're doing. They are blurring the lines. As I mentioned, if this was just something that they weren't going to feature in the story, they would have confirmed it. Anthem would have come out, Impact would have come out and go, yep, the reports are accurate. Don Callis is no longer an executive. He's just an on-screen talent or something like that. They haven't, because the intention is to weave it into the storyline. The storyline is Don Callis is abusing his power. He will eventually lose said power as Kenny Omega loses the Impact World Championship. That is the plan. So I guess as of right now, the plan is to have Kenny Omega versus Sami Callihan at Slammiversary in the main event. Where does Moose fit into that? Your guess is as good as mine, because Moose technically lost tonight. Now, did he get screwed over? Absolutely. Did he get pinned clean? No, he didn't. So one could argue there is still a possibility we get a triple threat match. He did, but the issue is that Moose technically was pinned. That's the only problem there. Does he go into that as a triple threat? I mean, you can let me know in the live chat. I mean, if you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. If you're buzzing and confused, and there's so many outcomes of Against All Odds, you can smash a like on the like button too, but be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. We are going to be doing videos for days, I think, talking about this, because there are so many permutations and ramifications coming out of that. How does Sami Callihan go back? How does Don Callis eventually lose his power? Because he will, because in real life he is no longer an executive vice president of Impact Wrestling. What does Moose do now? Does Moose get added to the match at Slammiversary, or does he now go off and feud with the Young Bucks? Because I guess the Young Bucks, they cost Moose the championship. The Young Bucks, are they going to compete in Impact Wrestling now, or at least at Slammiversary? If Moose does compete at Slammiversary against the Young Bucks, who is his tag team partner going to be? There is loads there, isn't there? There really is loads there to break down. I think. I'm kind of undecided on the triple threat thing, because I do think the story doesn't really involve Moose anymore. The story involves Sami Callihan, doesn't it? The story is now centering around Callihan. For weeks, they've been telling this story about Don Callis saying, oh, Callihan, he's not right, he's banned, we don't want him, I don't want him to be facing Kenny Omega, he's reckless, he's crazy, we're not going to have him, I don't want him in that role, I don't want him to be facing Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega's the king of Impact Wrestling, he's the king, he's all this and all that. I don't know if he would be really... The story is about Sami Callihan here. The story isn't about Moose anymore. But then again, then you can argue, okay, if the story's not about Moose anymore, where does Moose go here? And logic would suggest that Moose must go. He must then go to feud with the Young Bucks. I mean, there's just, again, I'm wrapping myself up in logic because it's difficult to figure out where this is going. It really is. I will do a quick check on the live chat because it's crazy. Moxie and Callihan would be gold, says David Perez. Normal Guy says, I saw the Bullet Club logo for the Slammiversary ad. There was lots of people in there. I think there's like Samoa Joe, who could be going to NXT. There was Iconics teases as Forgotten Sons, which we know one half of the Forgotten Sons is coming in. There was Okada, Nato. There's loads of guys in there. TNA's a lot says, Sami doesn't know that knowledge is power. Darth Thor says, it's a really good story they're telling. Great point how they may play it. Ricardo says triple threat match at Slammiversary. Darth Thor says I think they keep Moose off TV for a couple of months. Shabazz Jones says, I don't know if that's a spoiler or not, so no, we'll leave that one. TNA's Lot says Slammiversary show sold out. George Kenny says Moose versus Miro, Sami versus Kenny, Bucks versus Violent by Design. Man, it really looks like Alexander has taken that belt from Omega with option C at Bound for Glory. Like I said, there are so many different permutations as to where this is going. And it's exciting. This Slammiversary show could be a really, really big show. We're looking at a situation whereby maybe Omega versus, let's say Omega versus Callihan. Bucks look to be involved. King of the Mountain X Division match. How great does that sound? I mean, possibly, the Iconics showing up. Possibly, former WWE stars and Impact stars returning. Maybe Deonna Purrazzo versus Chelsea Green. I mean, talk about that card. It's incredibly exciting. And just, again, what a show. What a show tonight. I know, again, there were matches that maybe just didn't mean that much, but it was about the main event. Their big angle was the main event. They know Impact Wrestling, as I said before. Impact Wrestling know that. Go back to Impact Rebellion. Earlier in April, that was the most successful pay-per-view that Impact Wrestling have done since Anthem purchased Impact in 2017. Impact realized, given the success last year of Slammiversary, which was a massive success, it was their best pay-per-view last year in terms of buy rate, in terms of social media metrics. They know they can maybe beat Impact Rebellion with the Slammiversary event this year, with the former WWE stars showing up, former Impact stars returning, New Japan Pro Wrestling stars, Kenny Omega in the main event, big matches like a King of the Mountain match, possibly the Young Bucks showing up. They know they can beat what they did last year, and they know they can probably beat Rebellion as well in terms of buy rate. And this was their big angle. Tonight was their big angle to set it up, and I think they did it relatively successfully. One could argue as well, I'll throw this at you, if Sami Callihan has been fired and he showed up in Jacksonville tonight and showed up in Daly's place tonight, does that mean he can possibly show up in Daly's place for maybe an episode of Dynamite going forward? We know that Dynamite was taped, a couple of weeks ago? This was taped last week. I don't know if those tapings line up, but maybe they could have taped something. If Sami Callihan got in there once, who's to say Sami Callihan doesn't get in there again? Now, obviously, this would mean that AEW would have to promote an Impact event or an Impact star. Heaven forbid they do that, because they just don't. They haven't really done that during this working relationship, but who's to say they don't? Who's to say they don't do that? That's a possibility as well. So there is so much. And as I mentioned, there is so many different permutations. And was the ending slightly convoluted to this one? Maybe. Was it a bit overbooked with the ref bump, the Bucks coming in, then Sami Callihan coming in, then Don Callis firing, and Scott DeBoer chasing him off? It was chaotic, but I think it was chaotic in a good way. You know, like when you would watch an Attitude Era pay-per-view or an Attitude Era Monday Night Raw, and it would just go off the air, and you just come out of it going, what on earth was that? And you've got all of these different questions, and you are trying to predict, okay, so Omega, I know that Sami Callihan wasn't actually fired, and I know that Don Callis isn't exactly an EVP, and I know that he's going to lose his power somehow, and I know that Sami Callihan is going to come back, but how's he going to come back? And is it going to be Callihan versus Omega, or is it going to be Omega versus Callihan versus Moose? Are the Young Bucks going to compete? There are so many. There are so many different permutations to this, and it's very exciting. And if you're excited about what you saw tonight, smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. I mean, I could genuinely go on for hours talking about those ramifications. But I think the most likely outcome at this point, is, as I mentioned, there's a reason. There is an obvious reason that Impact Wrestling and Anthem haven't officially confirmed that Don Callis is no longer an executive vice president with Impact Wrestling or Anthem Sports and Entertainment. The reason they didn't confirm that is because they're going to blur the lines in terms of the storyline. They're blurring the lines in terms of eventually Don Callis is going to leave Impact. Well, he's left already. There was a report that went back. It was in December last year. This was right after this Impact and AEW working relationship began. And the report was essentially stating that Don Callis was going to leave Impact. He was going to move to Impact. He was going to move to AEW, and he was just going to become a talent. He was going to become Kenny Omega's manager. And at the time, people did question that report. I did myself, because the general feeling at the time was, well, he's an executive of Impact. Why would he leave Impact in an executive position to go just become a talent? Because the report was, his contract runs out in January, and everyone went, but if he's an executive, that he's an employee, he wouldn't have a contract. He would have to give notice. There was so many parts of it that didn't add up. But I think if you break it down and you look at it in different forms of context, I think if you look at it in different forms of context, you have to look at, okay, maybe he didn't have a contract. Maybe he handed notice. Maybe he told Impact he was going to hand notice, so his contract, his time with the company ended in January. And from what that report said, it was accurate. It was accurate that Don Callis has become an AEW talent, and he's no longer an executive of Impact. And like I said before, maybe the reason he decided, I don't want to be an executive anymore, is maybe he looked at better finances with AEW. That's a possibility. But also maybe he looked at it as, if you're an executive in any pro wrestling company, whether it's WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, that's a full-time job, 7 days a week with a lot of stress and a lot of pressure. And maybe Don Callis doesn't want that. Maybe Don Callis thinks, you know what? I can be a talent. I can work with Kenny Omega, one of my best friends. I can work with Chris Jericho, one of my best friends. I can help produce and coach and mentor backstage in AEW, and I can not have the pressures that I have in Impact Wrestling, and I can be part of a upstart and big company like AEW. Maybe that's what Don Callis thinks. So, I suppose questions, because we'll wrap this up in a minute because it's nearly 4:45 in the morning over here. This is the craziness that we live. This is what Impact Wrestling does to me, guys. I think the questions coming out of this are, Sami Callihan, how does he come back? He does, because I think Sami Callihan will still be in the main event at Slammiversary. Does he invade AEW going forward? Don Callis is going to lose his job somehow, probably by Scott D'Amore's doing, because Scott D'Amore chased him off. And do the Young Bucks wrestle for Impact Wrestling going forward? Those would be the big questions for Impact Wrestling over the course of the next week or so. So, very exciting. I'll read a couple of these comments before we wrap things up. Pact Entertainment says they released a teaser for the next week, which spoils Scott D'Amore bringing an Anthem official and Chris Sabin feuding with Moose. Interesting. Darthor says Impact is on a great string of pay-per-views. I agree. TNA's lot says King of the Mountain is Slammiversary thing, exactly. And Ultimate X is Destination X pay-per-view speciality match. George Kenny says so much better than Vince deciding everything. This is unpredictable. Wanda Allen says Impact preview for this week. Of course, we'll be doing Impact videos. We always do Impact videos this week. We do daily videos talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. TNA's lot says UK Impact fans are the best. You guys broke records for the company at Wembley, etc. Impact draws big over here in the UK. It was on Challenge TV for ages, that's why. But look, guys, we'll wrap this up here. Thanks, guys, for joining me on the watch long and this reaction stream tonight. Really appreciate you guys. You have no idea how much. I really appreciate the growing community we have here on the channel. I really do. So be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner, if you are new. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about, I mentioned Impact Wrestling, AEW, WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the live chat, or if you're watching this afterwards, in the comment section below. Really enjoy interacting with you guys. As I mentioned, be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. Really appreciate everyone taking the time to join us tonight. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. And I'll speak